Hey everyone, welcome back to the garage. So I've been fighting kind of an ongoing issue with my Model S here for a while of excessive coolant pumps, coolant pump running. The coolant pump or pumps, I could hear them running for just hours on end. So finally, I went into service mode and noticed that there were some DTCs for pump stop failure. Um, and If any of you do your own service on Teslas, you know without toolbox or even when you do have toolbox access, their DTCs can be a little cryptic. They have a DTC um, PDF document that walks you through some of it, but this one, neither of these were even on that PDF that I could find. So then I started to, so I connected the car at that point with Scan My Tesla, and sure enough, coolant pump number 2 was at 0% duty cycle, and coolant pump number 1 was at 100% duty cycle. At that point, I went ahead and totally disassembled the frunk, and with my hand, confirmed that yeah, coolant pump number 2 wasn't working. Checked the power and ground on coolant pump number 2, everything seemed fine. So kind of took the plunge and got myself a used pump off eBay for cheap, off a low mileage salvage car. And you might be like, well, why did you get a used one? Well, two things. I attempted to get a new pump from Tesla. The service center that I have locally is pretty much gutted. This is November of 2022, but when I was over at the Orlando Service Center not long ago, they told me that they laid off most of the people over here in Merritt Island. So they never respond to parts requests, and going to Orlando is a 150-mile ordeal. So that's why I ended up with a used pump. Couldn't even tell you what a new pump costs because they would never get back to me. And the whole typical response of, well, we'll just go there in person, well, that doesn't really sit well with me. This is getting to be a pretty major car company to just have to constantly manually go to the dealer to try to order a part. They need to fix that. That ran aside. So after seeing those DTCs, after feeling that pump not running, you could feel it not running, and the other pump running at 100% to compensate, decided I better do something with that pretty soon. One thing I want to mention is, other than this, observation that my pumps were running constantly, there was no user face or warning on this, which is pretty interesting. So an old Model S like this has 3 coolant pumps, 2 for the battery, which we'll get into a little later, their location and their purpose, but 2, in theory, 2 battery coolant pumps, and then on this old of a car, or well, it's not the age really, but the fact that it's rear-wheel drive, it only has 1 power train coolant pump. The dual motors have 2 of those, so a dual motor car would have 4 total, but this car has 3. And yeah, so that's just kind of where I ended up at. Bought the pump, and now we're gonna swap it. So I'm kind of working without a script here, so if you can't tell, this whole video is going to be very slapped together, a lot of jump cuts, stuff like that. I didn't really feel like going crazy on this. And also, to be honest, if you've been attempting a repair like this, you're probably more comfortable working on cars or your Tesla in general. This is not going to be like a soup to nuts how to do this. You will need to know how to disassemble your frunk and properly isolate the power on the car. By that I mean disconnect the high voltage and 12-volt systems. You'll be doing that multiple times to bleed it out if you bleed it like I do. So if you are not comfortable with those processes, there are other videos on YouTube on how to do this, but do not proceed unless you are comfortable doing that. And that's really my advice. So enjoy the rest of the video and watch my fun job swapping this bad boy out. I will say, I don't think it'll be in this video. At some point I might take this thing apart and see what's going on. I'm curious what the deal is with it. Kind of hard to obviously see anything wrong. I'm just curious if the thing's locked up or what, but it's totally dead. So anyway, thanks for watching. Goodbye. All right, so here's our new to us pump. Came off of a low mileage salvage car. At least on my car, battery coolant pump
1 and 2 are the exact same part number in the EPC. They have, so just like any automaker, Tesla's constantly iterating designs and or where they are sourcing their pumps. So the part number on the pumps, if you look above the plug, this is the vent, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit in another segment. You will find the part number to your pump. There are a couple different numeric prefixes they use. The newer ones, they have changed. This is the older one, but what they do change or had changed over the years on these was the letter at the end of it, pardon me. So this one is an E pump. I believe with this part number series, they're up to a G and an H before they switched to a new one. So the one on my car, again, my car is a 2012 Signature, so very, very early car, is a -A, which most of the pumps are in a car, but we will go out and find out if this bad boy works or not. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the lighting. Due to the way my car is parked and the way it broke down, I can't use my big shop lights, so I'm just having to rely on natural light here. Briefly, I want to talk about where the coolant pumps are on this car, and keep in mind I own a very early Model S rear-wheel drive. You need to review the official Tesla service documentation because over the years they did move the pumps around, and on the dual motor cars they have more pumps than I do. But we'll talk about the early cars, which according to the Tesla service documentation is the break point is somewhere in 2016. I forget exactly where, but from 2016 down on the rear-wheel drive cars, you're going to find this layout. So over here we have coolant pump number 1, battery coolant pump I should say. Over here we have battery coolant pump number 2, which is happens to be my problem child that we are going to be replacing. And then, out of scope for this video really, but there it is way back there. That is the the powertrain coolant pump right there. So 1, 2, 3 pumps total on this particular vehicle. And again, throughout the years, they rearranged where the pumps are. They added a 4th pump on the dual motor cars. At first, I believe the early dual motor cars, the pump is up here in the front. Underneath the frunk, like all these, and then I'm pretty sure they moved it to the rear drive unit area on the later dual motor cars, but I don't have a dual motor, so I can't speculate too much more on that. Something else I want to bring to your attention, I see this on a lot of used pumps missing, and I popped it off for the purpose of this video. Right here, there should be a plastic vent piece. So let's go over and look at coolant pump number 1. See it there? And what happens is, and this even happened to me, is when you're sliding the pump out of the rubber isolator, it gets caught and it pops off. And then, luckily mine landed right there and it was easy to get. And the used pump I have is actually missing this. But here it is right here. It's just a little plastic piece with a rubber O-ring, and it's a vent for the electronics inside. If you look through there, you can see a capacitor. But be aware of that when you are pulling your pump out. You may want to just preemptively pop this out so you don't lose it, and just have it in case you need it. All right, well, keeping with the abridged, fast-paced theme of this video, it's time to do the dirty work here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to jump cut to this, is we're going to disconnect this, which is a simple push lock disconnect over here. We're going to use we're going to then slide the pump out of its isolator here. On this side, the isolator is bolted down with a Torx under there. It's a little more difficult to get to than the other side, so I figured why even mess with that. It slips out of the isolator anyway. So once we slip it out of the isolator, I'm going to put a pan underneath it to catch any coolant dripping. Then we're going to put our hose clamp offs on both sides so that we can remove this pump with minimal coolant loss. So see you in a few minutes. Alright, so construction work going on around me, so deal with it. Remove the pump from the isolator, disconnected its electric connection, I should say, first. And using my hose pinch off pliers, I have both coolant hoses pinched off. Now I'm going to remove the spring clamps on both sides and work those hoses off, hopefully catching most, if not all, the coolant inside this pan, but you know, who knows, we'll see. All right, so I quickly realized my best chance of catching the mess out of this pump, what little there may be, was to take this side off first. And like most rubber hoses that have been on something 10 years, it's pretty stuck on there. I couldn't twist off with my hand, so I'm gonna use this pick and gently get under the lip all around, and it should slide that hose off. And as hoped, the pick did the trick and it slipped right off. So now we'll just do the same thing over there. I think I'm gonna go ahead and, just because of how shallow this pan is, due to how to bend it, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up that G48 coolant that spilled there. And we'll proceed with that one. And no problem over there, it came off nicely. It helped that that was just an easier place to get leverage to pull on it. So we'll get our new used pump and put it in. And you know, no promises, but maybe at the end of the video I'll tear this thing down, or have another video where I tear it down. Maybe we can see what failed inside it. Not sure, it's just, this pump is just straight up dead. It does nothing. Well, all right, here's our new used pump that we're gonna go ahead and just put back on the way we took the old one off. We'll slide it on each side and put it back into the rubber isolator and reconnect the electrical connection. And then we'll discuss how we're gonna test and bleed this thing. So there's our new to us pump. Replaced, hoses and clamps back where they should be, back in its isolator. The vent cap is back on it. We've already kind of talked about that a couple times, and the electrical connection has been reconnected as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bleed the system a bit. Now, I do not have Tesla Toolbox access via the web, nor the old version 2X fat client on a laptop. I would like to get my hands on that at some point, but just can't justify it yet. So what we're gonna do is, I know this is gonna be hard to see with the light. We're gonna fill the coolant up to the max line with G48 coolant, okay, which we already discussed, and that's what the car uses. So we're gonna fill this to the max line. And since the car is completely unpowered right now, both high voltage and 12 volt, what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook it back up, both sides, maybe a few times. And what the car does, if you've never done it before, is it does a few self-tests. It runs all the pumps, it switches all the valves, you name it. And that is often used as a trick to bleed the system as best one can at home. Another option would be, if you have one, is a vacuum pump bleeder. I unfortunately don't have one handy anymore, it broke. So that would also help things. But we're just gonna, power cycle the car 5, maybe 6 times. It's gonna take a little time. And we're just going to do our best to get the air out of there, and then see where we end up. Again, as I said at the introduction video, not a professional Tesla mechanic or anything like that, so you do this at your own risk and however you see best. Alright, so we're back a little bit later. I have filled, if you can see, pardon me, move the camera. I have filled the coolant to the max line with G48. I have powered the high voltage and 12 volt systems back up. I can already tell you that both battery coolant pumps are now operational. I can feel them. There was definitely some air in there. I felt a little cavitation when they spun up, so that should work itself through the system after a couple cycles. I can hear the car moving the quad valve around and the bypass for the front radiator, all that good stuff. So we'll just let it do its thing a few times and call it good, and then check our fluid level one more time at the reservoir. But the fact that I have coolant pump 2 back at all is a good sign. Oh, just heard the pump stop running, so I'm gonna go ahead and do my power cycle again. So I've run the pump, cycled the high voltage and 12 volt system about 5 or 6 times now. I no longer hear any cavitation on the pump startup for the last couple times. Did observe a little bubblage coming out of there and just barely had to retop it off. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in the car, see what we're seeing for diagnostic trouble codes in service mode. And then the car is at, like, I think 60 something state of charge right now, 60%. So what we'll do is we'll plug it in and I will force the coolant pumps to run while it charges eventually. And that'll help bleed out more and also get some more time on this new pump before I call it mission accomplished and button all this frunk and everything back up. I don't really want to have to do that twice. So, see you inside the car. Okay, welcome inside the Model S. This is my first time seeing what you're about to see. So we will go, if you don't know how to get into service mode, there are other videos on that, but long story short, go to software, you hold the Model S or whatever car you have logo, and then type service. And on these older cars, it's a little bit limited, but... So we have 3 active alerts. Let's look at service alerts. Still have one for pump bat 2. But it's a little different now. It doesn't say stop, so I'm not sure. We'll probably just plug it in, see what happens, see if it clears itself out. I don't know. I may have to Google this more or whatever, but yeah, at least we got the pump swapped and I know it actually pumps. So we'll go from there. Wanted to follow on the last little clip. I will say that now that I know that pump's working, I have had errors in the past where they just don't go away until there is a software update. I had one of my shutters broken, and that was that way for some reason. It had been broken a long time. And I thought it also might be useful to talk about these other errors I have, these other 2. Long story short, the center louver on my car, the left side shutter, if you've never seen it before, it's a little flapper that just goes this way. It's one blade. The center, each side has a center blade that attaches to those outer louvers. In the front bumper cover. My left side, driver's side in the United States, is broken. And when I say broken, it's completely broken off the motor. So it's getting no feedback. So that's why I have that and the active arrow errors at this time. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and charge this car for a while, get those cooling pumps both running, just let it keep bleeding out that system even some more, putting another 10% or so state of charge in this car, and then I'm going to check the coolant overflow bottle one more time, the surge tank, make sure it's all good. And then at that point I'll put the frunk together, and I would say that's about it for this video as far as the replacing the pump. I wish I didn't have that last error code. It dawned on me after checking the codes it would be useful to run Scan My Tesla on my tablet and just see what it's seeing. Things immediately look better. So again, we know we have 3 pumps. Sorry about that. All right, so before I did this, I should have taken a video of logging before this repair. The battery pump 1 was running at 100% duty cycle. Battery pump 2 was at 0, and the powertrain pump was at 30 like it is now. Keep in mind, I am plugged in to the wall right now, charging at 40 amps, roughly. So after the repair, it's running both pump 1 and 2 at 23% duty cycle versus the pump 1 at 100%. I will say, just being outside the car and having my head down in the frunk, and even with all the finish and trim still out, it's notably quiet. So it was really crushing that pump, kind of furthering my initial intro dismay with, other than going into service mode and seeing those DTCs, the car didn't tell me anything was wrong. I really think that should probably be a service event generating failure, but hey, that's just my opinion. Okay, so I'm probably going to seem like a crazy person, but I'll leave those other clips in too. Oddly enough, after leaving the car charging, an update was due for the car. And sure enough, just like I speculated, after the update applied, the cooling pump DTC is gone, and the only DTC I've left is active arrow, which I do indeed have an active arrow problem with that shutter being broken, like I mentioned. So, cool. I'm now codeless. Just a very odd coincidence that I happened to get an update and resolved all the codes.